I never thought adulthood would feel this heavy. Rent was due again, and my account was a brutal reminder of how little I had left after juggling two part-time jobs. Every penny I earned seemed to evaporate into groceries, electricity, student loans, and endless transportation costs. Living in the city was supposed to be exciting, full of opportunity. Instead, every day felt like I was sprinting just to stay in place. I was exhausted, but I kept telling myself that hard work would eventually pay off. Through all of it, there was Liam. He had been my light for the past 6 months, the one good thing that made the long days seem bearable. He worked at a trendy marketing firm, always brimming with stories about campaigns, late-night brainstorming sessions, and happy hours with coworkers. He loved to dream with me, painting vivid pictures of a future where we traveled the world together and laughed about the days we struggled. I believed him. I believed us. A few weeks ago, Liam had suggested we take a weekend getaway to a cozy cabin upstate. "You need a break," he said, wrapping his arms around me, his voice soft against my ear. I wanted to say yes immediately. I craved that escape from reality. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Early mornings by a lake, coffee in hand, his laugh filling the air. It sounded perfect, but reality was louder. Rent was due in 4 days, and after running the numbers over and over, it was clear. I couldn't afford both the cabin trip and my rent. Not even close. My heart ached at the thought of disappointing him, but my gut knew what had to be done. Eviction wasn't just a fear, it was a real threat. One missed payment could unravel everything I'd fought so hard to maintain. When I broke the news to Liam, I tried to keep it light. I told him how much I wanted to go, how badly I needed the break too, but that I simply couldn't risk losing my apartment. I offered to plan something cheaper, maybe a picnic in the park, a drive along the coast. His face shifted before my eyes, from excitement to something closer to indifference. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I get it," he said flatly, shoving his hands in his pockets. "You gotta do what you gotta do." The air between us, once so warm, felt suddenly chilled. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that he understood, that maybe he was just disappointed. Who wouldn't be? I was disappointed too. As we said goodbye that night, his kiss was quick, absent of the tenderness I'd grown used to. It gnawed at me, but I pushed the feeling away. Surely love, real love, could survive one responsible decision. I paid the rent the next morning. It felt both relieving and heartbreaking at once. The apartment was still mine for another month, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something else, something much more fragile, had been lost in the process. April 27th, 8:27 p.m., Fahad Ali Baloch. The distance didn't hit all at once. It crept in slowly, almost invisibly, until I realized I was standing alone, trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through my fingers. After I chose to pay my rent over the weekend trip, Liam's energy changed. His texts became shorter. The good mornings and good nights that once made me feel so loved started to disappear. Days would go by before he responded, and when he did, it felt obligatory, not affectionate. I kept telling myself he was just busy. Work had always been demanding for him, and maybe the disappointment of canceling the trip had hurt more than he let on. But deep down, a small, persistent ache began to grow, whispering that this was about more than a missed getaway. Conversations that once stretched for hours now fizzled into awkward silences. He stopped making plans, stopped asking how my day was, stopped caring about the small details that once mattered to him. When we did meet, it wasn't the same. His smile was thinner, his hugs looser, and his mind seemed elsewhere. I noticed him glancing at his phone more often, replying to messages with a little too much eagerness. I pretended not to notice. I kept laughing at his half-hearted jokes, kept making excuses for him, kept telling myself that relationships went through rough patches. I refused to believe that one decision, a decision made to protect my future, could undo everything we had built. Friends started asking questions. They saw the changes even when I tried to hide them. One afternoon, my best friend said bluntly, "Someone who loves you wouldn't make you feel guilty for being responsible." I laughed it off, but her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just the canceled trip. It was the way Liam had quietly withdrawn his affection, as if my choice had proven I wasn't enough for him. Social media made it worse. Liam started posting more often, pictures of nights out with coworkers, captions about choosing happiness and finding your tribe. Each post felt like a quiet message aimed at me, a reminder that he was moving on with or without me. I scrolled through the photos with a tight knot in my stomach, noticing people I had never heard about, girls he hadn't mentioned before. Still, I clung to hope. Maybe he needed time. Maybe he would realize that love wasn't just about grand gestures and spontaneous trips, but about surviving the hard parts together. I sent him a text one evening, asking if he wanted to grab dinner, just the two of us. He replied an hour later. Maybe next week. Busy RN. No apology. No warmth. Just indifference. Lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the truth. Love wasn't supposed to feel like chasing after someone who had already turned away. I had made the right choice for my survival, but it was becoming clearer that Liam was no longer choosing me. The truth came crashing down faster than I was ready for. A mutual friend, unaware of the fragile ground I was standing on, mentioned casually that Liam had gone on the cabin trip anyway. But he hadn't gone alone. His coworker, someone I vaguely remembered from his stories, had gone with him. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. But inside, something shattered. The lies weren't even complicated. They were lazy, careless, assuming I would never find out or wouldn't care enough to look deeper. I spent the next few hours sitting in my apartment, staring blankly at the walls. Every conversation, every excuse, every canceled plan replayed in my mind with new clarity. It wasn't about the trip. It was about who he had already decided to replace me with. I wanted to believe there was some mistake, that maybe the story had gotten twisted somehow. Against every instinct, I texted him. No accusations, just a simple question. Can we talk? When he arrived, he didn't even try to hide his impatience. He stood with his arms crossed, his body already halfway out the door. I asked him outright if he had gone to the cabin with her. His face didn't even twitch with guilt. He shrugged and said, I needed someone who wanted to live, not someone tied down by bills and worries. The words hit harder than any slap. In his mind, responsibility was weakness, and love was disposable if it didn't match his ideal version of spontaneity. I wanted to scream, to ask how he could reduce everything we shared to something so shallow. But the anger never came. Only a deep, hollow sadness. He hadn't even fought for me. He hadn't missed me. He had simply moved on the moment life got real. I asked if he had ever loved me, if anything between us had ever been genuine. He hesitated, then said, I loved the idea of you. That was the final blow. I was never really a person to him, just a fantasy, a momentary comfort until reality made me inconvenient. He left without another word, leaving the door swinging open behind him like an afterthought. I sat down on the floor, unable to cry, unable to move. The silence felt heavier than any goodbye. I kept thinking about all the small sacrifices I had made without question, missing lunches to save money, working overtime to afford small gifts, staying up late just to hear about his day. None of it had mattered. In choosing to protect my future, I had uncovered the truth about who Liam really was. He hadn't wanted a partner. He had wanted an escape. And when I refused to abandon my own survival for the sake of a fantasy, he abandoned me. The hardest part wasn't losing him. It was realizing that he had been slipping away long before I even noticed. I had been fighting for something he had already given up on. April 27th, 8:28 p.m., Fahad Ali Baloch. The days that followed were some of the quietest of my life. I didn't text him. I didn't call. I didn't even look at his social media. There was nothing left to say, no apology that would have made a difference. For the first time in months, I sat with my own pain without trying to fix it, without trying to find a way back to someone who had never really stayed. The apartment felt empty, but it was a different kind of emptiness, one that held space for healing, not abandonment. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into every shift, every task, finding small victories in meeting deadlines, saving a few extra dollars, making plans for myself instead of for someone else. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of life Liam had made sound so small. But it was mine. Each day I chose to stay steady, to honor the promises I had made to myself, felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. Late one evening, while folding laundry, a text from Liam lit up my phone. It was short. Thinking of you. No apology. No explanation. Just a careless tug at a wound he had no right to touch. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling nothing. No anger. No sadness. No temptation to reply. Just the solid, unshakable understanding that someone who truly cared wouldn't have treated my love like a backup plan. I deleted the message without answering, closing the door that should have been shut long ago. Healing didn't happen overnight. There were moments I woke up reaching for a phone that wouldn't ring, days when a song or a scent would drag up a memory I wasn't ready to face. But the difference was, I let those moments pass without letting them define me. I didn't cling to the what-ifs or the versions of him that never truly existed outside my hopes. I started making plans that didn't revolve around anyone else's dreams. I applied for a better job, one that offered stability and a real future. I took myself out to dinner, bought books I had been wanting to read, explored parts of the city I had always been too busy to see. Slowly, my life began to feel full again, not because someone else was filling the spaces, but because I was. One afternoon, sitting at a small cafe, watching the world move around me, I realized I didn't regret choosing to pay my rent. I didn't regret choosing myself. If anything, I regretted all the times I had made myself small for someone who couldn't see my worth beyond convenience. Loving Liam had taught me something painful but necessary. Real love doesn't ask you to betray yourself. Real love stands beside you when life gets hard. It doesn't walk away looking for the next easy thrill. In the end, the hardest choice turned out to be the most important one. And this time, I wasn't sorry for putting myself first. I was finally free.